Since the Bucksport Mill began 65 years ago, many historical events have brought us dramatic changes. Bigger and better paper machines, changing our product mix from newsprint to publication papers, and in ownership from Seaboard to Time to St Regis to Champion. When we decided to tell this story, it made sense for us to show you the changes in technology that have taken place over the years. But it didn't take us long to realize there is one constant more important than all the change: the people who have worked at the mill that really made these changes possible. Our mill is prospered because of thousands of men and women who have worked here. From the very first person hired at the mill to our newest employee, each one has made a contribution to our success. History is always being made at Bucksport. We'd like you to watch and listen to a few of the people who characterize the dedication, pride in workmanship, and community spirit shared by all Bucksport employees. It is their stories that make the history of the mill.
Wyman built a dam up in Bingham, and they had to just get rid of the power, sell the power. And Rice from Barton made these two machines, and they had them all built, and they couldn't sell them because of hard times. So Maine Seaboard, as it was called, bought the machines. So they used the power from Wyman Dam. And right where the mill is now, there used to be a big leather factory. And they bought that all out and tore it down and made the mill there.
Well, the construction, I had a pretty good job. I was a helper on a small truck, and we used to haul water and to a boiler that they had up in the yard to rivet the conveyors and those things together. Some of them had pick and shovel, which is all work, yeah.
My grandparents came here from Island Falls, and they built a house right across from where the mill is now. And the news came around that there was going to be a mill built on that site down below them on the river. The crew came in to start surveying out the land and everything, and then they brought in the construction workers. And they were dynamiting for the footings for the mill. And we heard this big boom, and I was about 3 or 4, and I was at my grandparents' house. And all of a sudden, there was one big boom, and then there was a second boom that was a little closer. And that was a great big rock that came through my grandparents' roof and landed in the upstairs bedroom. Well, about 10 minutes later, these construction workers arrived on the site, and they were very, very nice. They wanted to make plans to get the roof repaired and the windows that had been broken, get them all fixed. So they did. They were very, very cooperative, very, very nice, very helpful. So I think it came across to my grandparents and the neighbors, and half the town knew, of course, that this rock came through the roof. And it gave a good feeling that people were coming who wanted to help.
Thanksgiving Day, 1930, at 3 o'clock in the morning, we started up because at 3 o'clock in the morning, they didn't have any stock made, and it would be ready at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I come in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and some of them had slept over. So I was capable of taking the paper over the machine. I took it over at 3 o'clock in the morning before the regular man that back then had come in. Well, it wasn't such a hot roll of paper, but everybody was quite pleased with it. One thing, I'm sorry that I didn't keep a piece of the first paper that come over there, and I would have had something.
I came from Sweden in 1930 in September, and I was in Berlin, New Hampshire, and I tried to get a job. You can imagine during the Depression years, that was impossible. I came into Bucksport on a train, believe it or not, from Bangor. I get in on 6th end at 45 cents an hour and on a midnight shift. And that night, that was probably one of the scariest episodes in my life, to go in there and with these machines rumbling around you and not being able to talk or understand. And you know, when you work in a mill, there is always a greenhorn. He's the one that gets the gaff, and they always try to pull a stunt on him. So they backed on that. He was a Swede. His name was Andy Sandstrom. And he said to me one night, he said, Henry, he said, will you go downstairs and get a pail of steam for me? I didn't know what a pail was or steam, so what could I do? But there was something about the expression on his face that made me a little bit leery. But of course, being brought up like I had been, of course, you listen to what the boss tell you and you do as he said. So I was ready to go down and find out if I could find something that looked like it. But he took pity on me and he said, never mind, Henry. He said, I don't think we need it tonight. You don't think there was some relief for me? Ah.
I worked on wood boats unloading pulpwood. It was slippery, usually. The wood was slippery. And if you happened to get a good dry wood that had been peeled was usually dry. But that was good. You could you had a wood hook, you pile it into a rack, and a chain would be laid in the rack, and you'd pile the wood on top of it, and then the winch would hoist it up and put it over the side and drop it into the pond down here. And then it went from the pond up into the wood yard. Well, it was all work. It was work, yeah.
The mill was built brick by brick, and we lived fairly close to a big field and eventually started building houses. And that became known as the town site. And these houses were built for men and their families that were going to come and work in the mill.
It would look like an old-fashioned town. There was a fish house on one side, and there was the old hotel was not like it is today. And the man that ran it his name was Ruth Googans. You've probably heard that name. And he was the best bootlegger in town. Well, then people, they hung together. So us new people, we had a little hard time, but we got by with it.
I think a lot of the people who worked in the mill had children who wanted to end up working in the mill because it gave them a good living, it gave them a feeling of belonging to a town that really cared for them, because that's the way Bucksport was. The mill helped build the town up, and in turn the townspeople, I think, have supported the mill. It's been a two-way street.
I was tickled pink to get a job. And, you know, I had heard so much about America before I came. And to think that there could be a situation like this that we didn't know anything about depression, of course. But then the situation, in fact, when I was at home, I was a stonecutter before I left. We were organized, we had a union, and we had a situation here, when I came to the land of the free, that there was no union. In fact, he wasn't satisfied with that. The superintendent came to me one night. That wasn't his instigation. He came to me with a piece of paper, and he said, Henry, he said, we're going to ask you a question. Now, he said, if you say yes, you are all done. If you say no, you will still have your job. And the question was, do you believe in unions? But I just couldn't believe my own ears to think that something like that happened in our country here.
I thought I was very lucky to have a job because there were so many people out of work at that time. And you had a job, you never argued. You done whatever they told you. I worked 7 days a week, and I got $1.47 an hour when I worked there. And I had no time off until the NRA. Then when we went on the NRA, then I got 2 days a week off.
But the situation of credit union came about because there were so many that had borrowed money or bought things and they was not paying it properly. And you know, that's the best thing that ever happened to Bucksport. And the minimum you could put in was 25 cents a week. And Helen and I, we were so proud each month when we got the statement, there was 25 cents coming up each and every week, and it was adding up. So we kept on increasing it. Every time we got a raise at the mill, I took half of that raise to the credit union and the other half to the war bond.
The number 243 was an actual count of employees that left the mill for the armed services during World War II. So there was a big gap in employment there. The opportunity for overtime was there nearly every day.
George Burst was manager of the mill at that time, and he took 25 names and went to Ellsworth and said, "Here, I need these men." And my name was on that list. And but in order for him to do that, he had to make cannons on the machine shop. They had to remount cannons. And in that way, he kept most of the papermakers.
The installation of the coder on number 2 paper machine back in 48, 49 was a major turning point. Once you started getting into roll coating, why, you just had to change, the whole approach to paper making. New departments were established. We had a coating preparation department, which provided more jobs, more skills. And you had coating machines beyond the paper machines that were eventually installed to handle the pre-coated paper. So the first coder on number 2 paper machine was certainly a milestone.
Time was good to us here. We got a lot of orders from Time. We made good paper for them.
That elevated the prestige of the mill and the people. Just getting into the coated paper field as opposed to newsprint. It just opened up the market. It opened up possibilities that before had just been non-existent. I think that probably St. Regis brought with it a feeling that you could not sit still in the paper industry.
I was a graduate now in 1950, and I simply went, it was a miraculous thing. A telephone call came from a man that I hardly knew at the mill, George Bemis. And, "Are you an electrical engineer?" Well, I didn't know what the word meant, really. But, yes, I am. Well, there's an opening here if you want it. And so I went and was interviewed, and the personnel director saw that I was green as grass, even though I had a bachelor in electrical engineering. He sent me to Lloyd Burr, and Lloyd Burr took me in his office, and he plied me with questions. I couldn't answer a single one. He saw the the diamond in the rough, and it was rough. And they hired me, and I went to the electric shop, and that was the making of my career. I learned working with those electricians.
Early days for me were very difficult. I was extremely shy, and I really had no idea what I was going to do as an engineer when I came here. I was assigned a drafting board and projects to work on. Somebody told me what to draw. Somebody told me what not to draw. We had a plant engineer and an assistant plant engineer, and the guy whose changes you got made at the end of the drawing was the way it got sent out. Because the chief engineer would come through every morning, and I'll never forget, one of the first drawings I made was of a wooden conveyor, and I made grains on the wood. And he looked at that and he said, "Sonny, we know that's wood." So I never, needless to say, drew grains on wood again.
So we shipped a lot of paper by water from the dock down here at Bucksport. I liked to watch the ships come and go, and we loaded ships there, and that was interesting to me. You'd see the German sailors come in on a ship, or if it was from South America, the ships were quite notorious for bringing in liquor that was supposed to be locked up by the customs agent, but as soon as he'd leave, there was always someone out around the ship coming along offering to sell Scotch whiskey or whatever for, oh, just $1 a bottle, you know.
Of course, when they put in number 4, that's another thing. You see the jump from 2 to 4. Do you wonder where the third one was? That was a small, old paper machine they had down in the basement. They bought it to make wrapping paper with. It was an old machine, old rattle trap thing, and they called it number 3, or Oscar.
Well, when you were on number 3, you could stand at one end and see the whole of it. I mean, it was just a shot. I think it had like 13 or 14 dryers. So it was pretty easy to see. They used to cut a Dixie cup, and they cut little strips in it like that and make little flaps on it. You put that on the fly roll so you could tell if you had a wet end break. If the cup stopped turning, you know that you'd had a wet end break.
If the machine went down, I'd be told to go down to the wet end of the paper machine and to shut off certain valves. I had no idea what I was shutting off or why. It wasn't until '66 at the training for number 4 paper machine that I learned what the valves were, why they were there, and what motors to start, and the whole process. That was a big step in the right direction.
It's kind of a scary thing. It's like you never know what's going to happen from day to day, and it's especially I was president of the union at the time, and they had quite a lot of excitement going on.
There was a strike in the mill. People would even drive in the dooryard, and they'd say it might be 6 o'clock at night, it might be 8 o'clock, and it didn't matter. They felt that they could drive up, and they could sit out on the steps or out on the porch, and they could talk and explain their difficulties, their problems. Everybody was trying to help settle that problem.
The strike lasted about 6 weeks, maybe 7. I think that after we went back, well, there was not hardly any repercussions from it at all, so it was pretty well, the whole thing was rather smooth, I thought.
I started advertising, I'd say probably about the 1st of June, telling everybody I'm retiring early this year, and it's going to be in October. I'm leaving this place. Anything you want from me, you better take care of it. And as it drew closer, it's going to be October the 19th. And as it got closer and closer, it's going to be October the 19th, Friday at noontime. And that was my last day. And on the 20th of October, Champion took the reins. Historic.
There weren't many women engineers or managers, and I don't know if it disrupted a sense of community or something for a while, but for the most part, I think people were pretty good about it. I mean, I wasn't from Bucksport. A lot of people are born and raised and have come into the mill and worked with people that they knew. There's a lot of differences, and it's hard to say that someone's reaction is because you're a woman, as opposed to just that you're coming from a different perspective than they have been.
I think we ran into, our quality slipped Either that or our competition got ahead of us. Well, but I think we did slip some in quality, and one of our big customers on number 4 was time. So they came to us, I forget now just when it was 89, and said something had to be done. So we started a quality partnering team and started looking in-house what we could do from department to department to improve the quality of our sheet. And also, at that time, we went out to the press rooms where we send our paper. I think it's been a big improvement. We turned things around, not so much the quality team, but the people on the floor.
I ended up machine tender on number 2. That was my favorite machine, and it still is. Every time my son comes home, and I ask him, I say, how's he running? I'm just as interested now as I ever was. And it's still there, and making darn good paper, and they breaking records. Yeah.
I really think that I'm the last one that started up that mill. I don't believe there's another one. If there is, I wish he'd come forward so I'd know him, but I don't think there is. And I don't know, I kind of feel good. I had something to do with it. I feel good about it. And as far as paper making, I'll always like it. Paper making is just like the old firefighters. When there's a fire somewhere, so they're off they go. Well, I'm the same way. I'm just like an old fire hose, just ready to go. I listen to the paper machine. That's music.
How it's grown, how many people happily work there, have a livelihood through that mill, how they're able to support their families, have the things that they want, take vacations, go to places they wanted to go that they might not have been able to go otherwise. I think of that. All the connections that come in there. It takes a variety, a large area of groups of people. It's just a wonderful place. It's a wonderful thing to have in this town. I hope we have it, and I'm awfully glad to hear.